to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Rocio Quispe-Agnoli. I hope I didn't do too badly. Okay, that's good enough. I know most of you, but if you don't know me, I'm the new director of CeLTA, and my office is right there. And if we haven't talked yet, feel free to come by. I'm probably going to be in touch with you very soon. I'm very excited about this professional development series and our start with this now, because I can learn a lot too, and I really didn't have this on my own campus like this. And so I'm very excited about this resource, and I know you are too. So without further ado, please get pizza, please get up and eat and finish up all the food so it doesn't get wasted, and I will leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Felix. And thank you everyone for being here today. I thought there was going to be no one today because I didn't see it in the calendar, so it's a pleasant surprise. My name is Rocio Quispe-Agnoli. I'm a professor of Spanish in the Romance and Classical Studies department. My area of specialty is colonial Latin America, 16th to 18th century, but we use a lot of digital tools to explore the past. So, I want to share today my experience that is very much in progress. I am still in the trial and error period. I think I'm going to be for a long time, with as usually happens with projects. And to tell you how this started, I am going to share my experience, challenges, things I am learning while I'm doing podcasts. With my podcast series has a very specific goal, but it started as an initiative with a very specific goal, and that specific goal was and is to showcase collaborative initiatives or a common topic or a common theme, or that faculty and students from different disciplines are working on, and sometimes they don't know they are working on the same topic or area from different perspectives. Since I'm in a language department, my main goal is to make visible the work of people working in the language departments. That includes faculty, graduate students, and the like. And there is no problem working or incorporating voices from people from other disciplines and departments, but my condition to record any podcast is to have at least one faculty or a student member from a language program at MSU. That's my condition. So that is more or less how this started. I also wanted to point out with this, and I'm pointing this out, I'm planning to do it for many years. I have been doing it for years in the past, that we do collaborate, even in the humanities, because when you are working, I'm a literary scholar, I have a degree in linguistics, but I'm a literary scholar and cultural studies scholar, and we listen to two different discourses that we have to comply with. From one end is that you are going to get the job and the promotions, etc., with the sole authored works and projects. That's what happens in the humanities, at least with literary scholars. But from the other end, the institutions, and that is direction in which we are going in the disciplines and in the profession, is asking for more obvious collaboration. And I made a research of what the people in the language departments are doing 2 years ago, and I realized that yes, they are collaborating, but it's not visible. So the idea of the podcast is to make it visible, visibility. Yeah. So well, I'll start with that, and my goal today is to share with you what I have been learning about listening to others. That is so important. That's such an important skill in the profession in general, in our personal lives as well, in our social lives, but to listening to others. And when we listen to others, we learn about them. And also that has been and is my process. I learned unexpectedly that colleagues from Japanese, Chinese, German, French, they are working on a topic similar to mine, although we are working in different times or geographical locations, but we are thinking very much alike, and that has been possible to the fact that we are holding conversations, sharing, exchanging ideas, and we find common points. And then the idea of the podcast is to bring them together and talk about these common points, in a kind of informal but at the same time educated conversation. And this is one platform on which people get excited and start thinking of formalizing collaboration. And it's also, I have also found on these conversations and that even if it's informal conversations without an official collaboration, and even more when there is an official collaboration, that it's a very supporting environment. We're building a community. We have a community, a scholarly community, and it strengthens our ideas and our projects. And I notice that when I write about them. It's great to be able to pull and to connect the dots beyond my own specific field with what other people are doing. And well, when we learn to listen to others and we learn from others and we we realize these common points, we are able to start producing new knowledge. Or perhaps to keep talking about what we have been talking about, but from different views, from different perspectives. And that, for me, is an eye-opening experience. For me, that's exciting. And also, in the scholarly world, it sells pretty well. So, it has a pragmatic. So, what is a podcast? I start with the basics. Probably most of you already know these. So, but perhaps there is one person who doesn't, and let's start with that. A podcast is a digital audio file. It's digital. It started with the digital culture that is made available in the internet for downloading. It has to be downloadable to any mobile device or computer. And depending on how advanced are you with podcast series, it's supposed to be a series. There has to be a topic or a common feature in the series. New installments can be received by subscribers. The term comes from iPod, and broadcast. So podcasts started to circulate around year 2010 to the present. And people like podcasts because they can be listened at any time. It's very convenient. You don't have to be fixated to a certain schedule in the radio. Waiting for a program. Similarly to TV, you can download it and listen to it at any time, or it's always available in the web, which is in the World Wide Web. And its casting ability, meaning that because it uses the internet, it reaches a global audience anywhere in the world. And as long as they understand the language, of course, in which the podcast is recorded. So, what is not a podcast? That is important because it's not a radio show. It's not a radio show. It's not a lecture or a talk. And why it's not a lecture or a talk? Because usually lectures and talks, even when there are Q&A at the end of the lecture or the talk, it's not a fluid conversation, okay? And talks are formal. There is certain formality in the podcasts, but my goal and the idea of the podcast to make them attractive is to make them sound like informal conversations. They're conversations, but educated. People know about what they're talking. And it's not, the second example is like a round table after a movie, last Latino Film Festival. It's the same thing that in that presentation, we talk with the audience, Q&A, but each of us, we were asked to summarize some views. It's very similar to a talk. Yeah, that is not it was recorded, it's available online, but it's not a podcast, because in a podcast there has to be a fluid exchange of ideas, which doesn't happen in presentations. This is a podcast. One of the beauties of the podcast, as has happened with explosion of internet and digital resources, is that it can be produced by anyone. Any of us here can produce a podcast as long as they want to share and communicate with the world. It's not exclusive to big name media. Yeah, it's not exclusive to mainstream media. Yeah? It can be produced and then distributed and promoted. The podcast also, as I have mentioned before, builds a community of individuals that share a common interest. Here we were talking with Professor Scott Beam and I don't remember his name, from the English department, and two graduate students about the Latinx Festival from last February, and about a 5-minute documentary Professor Beam made about DACA, and we have two representatives of DACA here, and we were holding a conversation. The other wonderful thing about a podcast, and I say this as a teacher, is that when we enter the recording studio, because you need, and I'm going to go into the technicalities of what you need when you enter the recording studio, which is this one. This recording studio is in the second floor of this building, by the way. Yeah, it's no electronic devices are allowed, because the sound recording is so crisp that anything can be recorded. So I have learned to tell people, no mobile devices, no cell phones, everything stays beyond the glass wall. There is a glass wall and the technicians are the other side of the glass wall. Nothing. And for 20 minutes, we just focus on the topic and we are listening to each other. And that is wonderful. We are not distracted with anything. If I have a piece of paper, it's because I have my questions to remember, and I'm gonna go into what I ask them to do, but I don't allow anything else than perhaps index cards with bullet points or a sheet of paper with bullet points, and that's it, nothing else. So that for me, it's a very fulfilling experience. For 20 minutes, we stop and we actually listen to each other, and that is fantastic. Yeah, so especially in the digital world in which we live, in which everybody is consumed by their mobile devices. Okay, we have some examples at MSU, and at the end of this presentation, I will share my PowerPoint with Felix and with Sanja, if they want to share it or distribute it the way they see fit. And I'm sorry for the color, is the default color of the PowerPoint. But I have them here, these 3 websites, and I'm gonna go in order. Okay, which one I put first? Yeah, I will start with T with BVP. Yeah, because there is an order or a reason in the sequence. These are examples produced here. Yeah. This is the SoundCloud portal for T with BBP. It was a program produced I don't remember, but it has 75 episodes, and it was produced during, I think, 2 years with personnel of CeLTA, and with Professor Van Patten, who's no longer working with us. And it has a very specific orientation, which is language learning, language teaching, acquisition of second language, etc. It is, because I know that Bill plans to continue with this in another platform. It is fairly sophisticated in the sense that they did not only record in the studio, but they also had live phone calls available, and it was transmitted as a radio show on a specific day of the week at a specific time, and then it was saved here to be available for everyone. So this is like a hybrid between a radio show with live phone calls and live questions. They also had a feed with questions from the audience when they were listening to it at that specific time, and then it's archived as it remains as an archive of podcast. These are very long. These are at least 1 hour long. So Bill Van Patten, he has histrionic skills. So he really tried, or he made it look like a radio show, and made many jokes, comments of all kinds, etc. So this is a hybrid, I would call it. It's not exactly a podcast, and it not also with the goal I particularly have in mind. But it's available, you can listen to it. And one of the things, and one of the reasons I don't go this way is because these are very long. These are 1 hour long. So the longer you make the podcast, the more elements of like to release tension you need in the podcast. And that is why when you listen to these, there are many comments of things that are happening in the country or in Michigan, at MSU at that moment, and there are jokes, so that is one example. The other example, and this is being produced, is a podcast that is the liberal arts endeavor. Let me see. Yeah. Of the Dean's Office of the College of Arts and Letters. So they have right now 23 episodes. It has been in production the last 2 years. It will continue. The podcasts also are usually, these ones are 30 minutes long or more. And these are more, they're fluid conversations, but these are conversations about, there are many administrative topics. Sometimes it's boring for me, but it is me. I think it is kind of addressed to students, but I don't think students would listen to this. I'm thinking in undergrad students. The topics are faculty mentorship at MSU, Humetrics, the Digital Scholarship Lab, digitizing African photography. I have a podcast about that accessibility in higher education. There are podcasts about technical aspects of the profession, administrative aspects of the profession. So I think for someone in administration, or who who wants to learn about digital humanities, more specialized, they are okay. Yeah. So, and this is the one I have. I call it Collaborative Edges, and it's a portal. That's the other thing. Podcast, when you need a portal, not a website, not a web page, a web portal, which means a portal is just a doorway, okay? And it has to be minimal, has to be simple, yeah? And I learned that actually from the Tea with BBP project, hybrid. His show also has an audio portal that is very simple. Is perhaps not a fair word, but it's very minimal, and that is what you want. Yeah, so I created the icon. Actually, a graphic designer created the icon. You need an icon, or well, I look at all those details because then the icon will be used in social media. Yeah, and I have a concept. You need a concept. My concept is collaborative edges, and edges that we cross borders, but we are also at the edge of new findings. Something I have learned also, all the images are mine, or were taken by me. I am very careful with the copyright of images. And here you have, as you see, it's a very brief description to what it is, what is the concept of this series. The theme, it's very simple, and the theme is, it's me that I put the concept together, and I contact the people, and Daniel Trego, who works also for CeLTA, who is the technician of the sound recording studio, and he helps me with all the technical part. That's the theme. And then the most important part are precisely the podcasts. So I have, in the last year, I have recorded 9 episodes. I have 3 more planned to record this semester. I try to record 1 episode per month, and Bill Van Patten recorded 1 episode per week. That's a lot of work, and if you go into this, you will see that the episodes last between 20, perhaps 15 to 25 minutes. In my ideal world, they should only last 10 minutes. But, and this is one of the challenges, I'll get there, it's very difficult to keep people under 10 minutes because they become enthusiastic and they start talking, and you don't want to cut that flow, right? But I aim to record 10 minutes, perhaps 12. It always goes way over. Yeah? So, and why 10 or 12 minutes? It has to do with attention span of students, undergraduate students. Because I want undergraduate students, or I want my colleagues who are using these, or who are, either they are part of the podcast or not, but they want to use it, I want them to use it in the undergraduate class. And the idea is that the podcasts are downloadable in the iPhone or the iPods or your iPad, you know, any of these devices, and the attention span starts to wear out after 10, 12 minutes. Yeah. This is one of the things I have to work on, and I have to find a way to work on with my colleagues or the people who participate in the podcast. So there are 9 episodes. You can look at them. They are all different. They talk about cinema, photography, indigenous photography, migration. That's the DACA film, talking about the DACA film, the Latinx Film Festival with directors. Arabic identities in the world, language of self and Italian cinema, African arts and photography, have it there. So as you can see, the studio is very small. So I have learned also that I cannot have more than 3 people in the studio. The studio can hold up to 5 people plus me, but it's ideally 2 people. 3 is the limit for me, and then I'll go into that. But well, those are examples that you can look at. They are available. Yeah. And before I go into what you need to create a podcast or participate in one, depending on what you want to do with it, I want to give you some ideas on how could I use podcasts in my class. Well, there are 2 ways, and I separate them in the 2 columns. The first one is if you record in a language that is not English. And this is one of the things I want to do eventually. I want to start to record podcasts in languages other than English. Yeah, but I need to make sure that everyone around the table does speak the language comfortably. German, French, Spanish, but then I will have to do the same podcast in English as well. But I would like to do it in a language other than Spanish. You can use it as listening comprehension in your classes, embed it in D2L or the platform you are using. You can create podcasts related to your class content and use them to deliver information about topics in the class. If you do that, you need an operation that includes instruction sheets to record information. I use recordings in my hybrid classes. Many times I don't video record, I just record my voice, but those recordings don't last more than 5-8 minutes. And there is a whole operation there. The students, my undergraduate students, when I use those recordings, I'm not talking about podcasts, it's just my voice talking about, I don't know, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, for instance. I don't go over 8 minutes. There are a sheet with instructions. They have to collect information. Then there is a quiz or an assessment. The students, the undergraduate students, like it a lot. They like it a lot. I have replaced handouts that one is tempted to put in D2L, or the answers to the questions in writing. I have replaced those with recordings. The students like it. It's more active learning, and it always comes up in my evaluations, and they tell me that they really like it, because then they can listen to it several times. They say they are practicing their listening comprehension. Of course, I'm doing it in Spanish, and I am using a slow pace of Spanish, something that you cannot control in a podcast. You cannot control how everybody's talking in the podcast, right? But well, anyways, you could use the podcast if you want to go that extra mile to make sure that you're covering all these elements needed for listening comprehension this way. Or this is what I would do, and you can have your students working in groups to create 5-minute podcasts for your class. For that, you need a recording studio. You need instructions, and don't underestimate the instructions. When I say instructions, it's not only the questions that people are going to prepare, but what's going to happen during the recording and what they should and should not do. You have to provide training. There is always testing. Every time I record a podcast, I allow 5 minutes of testing, and I learned that from Daniel Trego. Because believe me, even the most distinguished professor is not used to a sound recording studio. They need training, and you need to provide a podcast platform. But that I'm going to go into that in the next slides. Podcast platform is where is the podcast going to be available? SoundCloud, internet page, audio portal. Wherever you are going to put it, and you have to build that platform. So it's not difficult. The college and MSU and CeLTA have helped me to do that in the past, but it's time consuming, at least the first time you do it. And then when you have everything together, it just kind of run by its own, on its own. Okay. Now I go to the one I create and produce, Collaborative Edges, the concept. I already told you about the concept. The idea, and this is something I have to stress a lot, especially to my colleagues, not so much to the students. When I say students, I usually have graduate students. We tell a story. You have to think of it as a blog. It's an informal but informed conversation, and we are interviewing each other. It's not one way. It's not me just asking questions. We are in a conversation. Very important too, and that is one of the things teacher scholars struggle with, is that you are not gonna read a paper. when you listen to the podcast, you will realize there is one, I'm not going to tell you which one, yeah, but there is one that I struggle with that, with one specific or two specific participants, because they came with papers and they started reading their papers. And I had to interrupt them and says, no, you don't read papers, yeah? You already know about your topic and you talk about it, yeah? And you know better than anyone to talk about the topic. So, but that is still a struggle. And I think it's because people are not used, my colleagues, I mean, and not only my colleagues, our artists do very well. I love doing podcasts with artists. They are fantastic. Yeah, they don't read papers, they know what, they talk very fluidly about what they are doing, etc. And I struggle with scholars because they are not used to. So they need to be trained without knowing that they are being trained. So, yeah. The tech part. Podcasts are open access. Yeah. I know that there are podcasts out in the world that they have so many subscribers, so people pay for the subscription. I'm not even going to dream about that, and I'm not interested in that. So it's an open access, which means that you need a digital platform available to anyone every time, at any time. To be effective, it requires digital platforms and applications. First, a recording studio, and thank God we have one here. That's why I started working with it. And the technical support, which in my case is Daniel Trego. In our case, is Daniel Trego. But Daniel is, I think, he's working on 3 series of podcasts. So the college authorized last semester for him to train a second person, because Daniel is not always available and one person. It's not a good idea to only have one person. You need at least 2, right? So there is Tony, an undergraduate student who is helping if Daniel is not available. Then the first thing, I created a Gmail account. Yeah, a Gmail account, you're going to need it because that's where I organize all the information only related to the podcast. I had to create a SoundCloud account. I had to purchase music for the beginning and the end. I had to create the web portal with all what that implies. And I had to buy the domain. And I also created a social media, Twitter. I don't have Facebook, I don't use Facebook, but with this project, I have discovered the power of Twitter for promoting projects and ideas. So now, since this started with support of the college, and it's a service to my colleagues at MSU and beyond, you know. So the college gave me they didn't restrict me at all, but they asked me, please, can you put MSU, that's why I use the MSU green color there. You know, MSU has to be present somehow because it's important for them. And that's why the handler is MSU collaborates, yeah. So I had to do all these one by one. It's not difficult to do. Anyone can do it. It's just time consuming. I have now everything set up. So what I do now is I just contact the people, now what's happening to me is that people are coming to me saying, I want to do a podcast. Yeah, last year I had to go after the people, would you be interested in doing podcasts? I have never had a no. So that was good. Okay. Creating and producing a podcast. The letters are the first letters of all these steps. The first thing is planning. Just to record 15 minutes, you need hours of planning. Yeah. And the planning includes identifying the groups or the people you you would like or you offer to record. The good thing now is after 1 year, as I told you, the people are now coming to me, yeah? Not all the time, but they are coming to me asking for the possibility of recording a podcast, and I said, fantastic. My only condition is that there has to be someone from the language department or CeLTA. Because either faculty, graduate students, staff, there has to be someone, yeah? The next thing is designing the questions, preparing the questions. I'm gonna show you some examples. Preparing the questions that I'm gonna give as a guidance to the participants of the podcast. I have learned, I started with 5, 6 questions, now I keep them to 3. I know no more than 3 questions, that's plenty, yeah? And the questions are points of departure to warm up the conversation, yeah? They are pretexts to start talking. Of course, to design the question, I have to do some research. I cannot talk about Muslim cinema without having done a little bit or at least a 1 hour research about the event and about the colleagues or the participants of the podcast. Yeah? And only after that I can provide or propose the questions. I always negotiate the questions with the participants at least 2 weeks in advance, you know, because they may have better ideas to ask this or that. 3, communicating instructions effectively prior to recording day. These are instructions in terms of content. Technical instructions, you cannot drink water while you are in the recording studio. We are gonna hearing your throat swallowing the water, believe me. Yeah, that's technical, still instructions like that. The most important one is don't read the paper. Don't read, talk, yeah? And that is hard, huh? Yeah. Repeating instructions, yeah? Even right before we start testing, we spent at least 5 minutes testing the equipment, and that is very important. You're gonna see pictures because we have big headphones and the microphone is practically here invading your face, you know, and then we have to test each other's voices and audio, and when people do that, when we do the testing, then they realize, oh, this is serious stuff, you know, this is professional stuff, yeah. So they put them in the mood of doing the podcast the best they can. Recording, I like to take photos of the people in the podcast because I like to embody the voices with photographs. The next step after the recording, we record all at once, yeah? I'm gonna get back to that. Cleaning the recording, I don't like editing because we actually don't edit. Daniel Trego and his assistant, they are wonderful cleaning noises, background noises. We had a podcast in which a person was a bit sick and she was coughing, yeah? And she was very good at moving her body away from the microphone when she would cough, but Daniel, I don't know how he did it, magic, he removed or minimized the noise of the coughing. That is what I call cleaning, yeah, without cutting in content. Publishing is the next step. That is very easy. Danielle publishes in SoundCloud. Let me know, and then I transfer everything to the web portal, and I start promoting in Twitter or other pages. These are easy to embed. So many of my colleagues embed it to their websites or to their departments' sites or wherever they want to. So I already talked about, this is the studio, and those black squares now, they contribute to the soundproof. So this is the studio. You will see there is a screen or a TV monitor like this one there. Some people use that to put the questions of the podcast. I use it to put the time as a timer, big timer, yeah. And well, the list of 3 questions to start up the conversation, as I told you. I'm sorry, this is very small, so I'm going to read it to you, but you will be able to read it when you have the PowerPoint. Planning and design. This is episode 3, Collaborative Arabic Identities Across the Mediterranean and Beyond. It was after an event on the topic in the Linglang department. So these are the questions that we came up at the end after I negotiated with Professor Suleiman and with Professor Bernstein, who are being interviewed there. Yeah. So I start with an introduction. Between November 1st and 3rd, the conference Blurring Boundaries took place at Michigan State University. Our guest today organized the event. Before we start our conversations, could you please introduce yourselves and your connection to the conference topic? Then you will see that I make, it's like in a playwright, specific instructions to Camelia. Who are we, who is the other? To Mark, Safwan, Camelia, how do you approach this? To Mark, could you tell us about your findings? And to Safwa, you have work on self-identification, etc. So they know that in advance, but I also tell them that we improvise. So perhaps I ask something to Mark, and then Camelia has something to add. So we use body language cues to know I want to talk about that. Yeah, so it's and I let people talk, and that is the thing that I ideally plan for 12 minutes, but people get excited, and then they tend to talk, and then I have to start using the common cue. We need to cut, because otherwise it's too long. You know, when they get excited, they can be talking about the topic for days, you know, and that's not precisely what we want. The instructions, this is a podcast about migration, a migration event. I don't know how many times I repeat instructions. By email, when they get there, when we are doing the testing, and right before we start. Yeah. And they have, the participants, they have to experience the recording studio. That's why testing is important. And that's, all noises matter. If you sniff, it matters. As I said, if you drink water, we can hear it. Yeah. Phones or anything that rings is, it's behind the glass wall. We have to agree on body language, the cues I'm gonna use to say, hey, you have to start. You have to finish what you're talking about, or you're gonna be next, or this is what I do when I want to communicate with you, but in silence. That's fun. That's fun, usually. And, well, no electronic devices, which I see it, also the positive side, no distractions. No one is checking his or her phone. So, additional instructions. These also go in the sheet of questions. The sheet of questions looks very much like a playwright. Yeah, like because I put introduction, and music. There is music. There is music at the beginning, and there is music at the end. And Danielle Trego and I, we already know when exactly he's gonna start fading the music and I start talking, and when I'm about to finish talking and he starts playing the music. Yeah. So and I make an introduction, and then I always make this point. From this point on, once I make the introduction, a fluent conversation with comments and questions follows. I will use hand gesture to indicate time restriction and wrap up answers. That is a typo. And you will think, Rocio, that's so obvious. Why do you have to put it in writing? I have to put it in writing because people forget, and they have a copy of this in front of them. And I use bold or italics to distinguish instructions from questions. Yeah. And then, well, you see I put ideally 12, 14 minutes. That never happens. if it's an event or the person is working on a publication, or if any means of dissemination, I always make the point to mention it. It's a little of promotion there, always. A website or a book or a documentary or something that is coming up, or a talk, yeah? And I also learned this from the college podcast, the disclaimer that the ideas and opinions expressed here do not reflect those of the college or MSU or any of the sponsors. You know, that's the legal language. And then the music. These all go in the sheet of instructions. Yeah? Okay. So, publishing and promoting, I already told you, we put it in, Daniel Trego, when he has the recording ready, he let me listen to it. I said, okay, it's a go. Goes to SoundCloud, and from there I put it in the website, which is not difficult to do. And then from there I start tweeting about it, yeah? And what is pending, I'm not there yet, it's something I need to try, or to make it happen, is real simple syndication. I have not prepared yet the RSS feed, yeah? For listeners to easily subscribe and to the podcasts and receive alerts when a new podcast is available. Yeah, still have to work on that. Challenges I have encountered. I told you at the beginning, I feel that I am still, and I'm going to be for a while, in the trial and error phase of this project. Creating the whole operational system and platform, that was time consuming, and I learned. And I have a wonderful teacher who was Daniel Trego. Daniel Trego came with the experience he gained from producing tea with BBP. Yeah. And it's an investment of time. It pays off once everything is together, the puzzle is complete, it runs practically by its own. To record 15 to 20 minute podcast, I need a whole hour with the participants. Yeah. First, sometimes they don't arrive on time, but they don't arrive too late. You know. Second, we do testing. Yeah, as I said. Third, sometimes things go wrong. We have to start all over. Yeah. That has happened only once, and at the very beginning, because I detect the problems right at the beginning. Problems is don't read. This is not a scholarly presentation. Don't read, talk. Yeah, so let's start all over again. Another challenge, as I said, keeping podcasts short, because people, once they get enthusiastic, they like to talk. And that is great, and I love it. I love when people are having a very enthusiastic, spontaneous conversation. But I also keep in mind that I want the students to listen to this, and they won't listen to more than 15 minutes is the very last limit, you know. And you will see that none of my podcasts are 15 minutes. The shorter one is 18 minutes. So that is a goal where I think that the next ones, the ones I'm going to record this semester, I'm going to tell them 10 minutes, because then I know we'll go probably 15. Challenge, training podcast participants. As I told you before, artists are wonderful. Creative people are fantastic. Any art, yeah. Probably because they have more experience giving interviews about their work than scholars. Scholars give talks. They don't give interviews, or they are not so used to give interviews as creative artists, and that is why I have to train them without letting them know I'm training them. You know, do not write, do not read a paper. The body language cues are a must. You have to comply to them, otherwise we have to start all over. Yeah. Do respond to the cues. Pay attention to me. If I say you have to cut it, you have to cut it. And there have been some people very difficult to cut. But well, personalities. Do not talk for more than 3 to 5 minutes. That's another challenge. That's why I put the big timer in the screen, and I point out the timer. Be aware of noises. That is a discovery with a testing part, as I told you. And this is a challenge, and you have to make sure your participants understand what it means. Once we start recording, we go all the way until the end. It's not going to be edited. This is not a radio show. Yeah. Some of the participants I have had, it's a minority, they have thought that we were recording like 30 minutes and that Daniel and we were going to cut pieces, and make it 10 minutes like a radio show or 5 minutes. No, we don't have that capacity. Yeah, so it's all recorded at once. And they have done, my colleagues and the students, they have done a pretty good job by taking that in consideration. Hits, good things, pleasant outcomes from these. People actually listen to each other, yeah, and they learn about others. They don't get distracted. They get nervous out of excitement. I love to see that, especially with professors. Yeah, the artists are more, they have more experience with that. But you will be surprised, or I have been surprised by people that I thought had a lot of experience with public speaking, being nervous about recording, but they are excited at the same time. The people who are recorded, they like to listen to their podcasts. And many want to repeat the experience. Now that all the ones I have recorded last year, they come back and ask me when are we doing the next one. So they like it, yeah. And people use podcasts. That's one of the reasons they like it, to promote their work and gain visibility, which aligns with my goal. I have been at MSU 18 years, and the people in the language departments do fantastic work. It's just not visible. Yeah, not for MSU and not for the community at large. And that is one of the goals of the series. Other experiments. This has nothing to do with podcasts, but I like to experiment. Yeah, is that I have. Once I got a project with a program that is now is no longer in existence, CeLTA, about diversity and inclusion in arts and letters, and I recorded a set of I think there are 5 or 6 5-minute video interviews of undergraduate students to talk about why they are studying Latin American literature, and I have them available in this website. Well, that's my website, in videos in YouTube. That was very time and labor consuming, and we recorded a lot of video these videos we did. I did edited with IT help and a professional graphic designer help and a videographer. It's a lot of work when you have video. I like the final outcome, but I doubt I will do it again. I prefer to go with podcasts. The mannequin challenge, that is just fun I do with my graduate students. So if you go to that link in YouTube, I recorded like 5 mannequin challenges with my graduate students in a class. And the graduate students started to using it to promote GSA Tropos, or the Graduate Student Association at that time. This was like 3 years ago, yeah? But in any case, podcasts, video interviews, games like the mannequin challenge, built a sense of community, and I like that. People feel good, I feel good, we're listening to each other, and that is one of the thing I enjoy a lot in our profession. So perhaps I'm just gonna mention this quickly. I think it's, yeah, that's the last one. Want to participate or create in a podcast or create your podcast, the first step, you have to find a topic. The second is you have to find people working on that topic and with the same or different backgrounds. I like different backgrounds because I'm working on collaboration and interdisciplinarity, etc. Then questions you would like to be asked. Think always that way to start working on the questions, coordinating date and time and final questions, and then all the other steps. If you are interested in recording a podcast with me about a common topic that we will have to find together, let me know, contact me, and we'll make it happen. Okay, I have 3 planned this semester. We can do it at the end of the semester, we can do it in the spring semester. I have another one already planned in the spring semester. Okay, it's just finding the common topic among those who want to try. Okay, so I think I talked enough. It's already 2 p.m. I talk as much as my participants.